G'day, it's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Dowling from the website and YouTube channel Kangaroo Court of Australia. Now, I've just published an article in relation to Anthony Albanese and his relationship with Scott Morrison, in particular, the Aukus deal and how they're sort of working together, or at least seem to be. And the question's got to be asked is why Anthony Albanese has never held Scott Morrison accountable for all his crimes when he was the Prime Minister. If he had been held accountable, well, you wouldn't see Scott Morrison on the world stage now. And I'll show you some video of Scott Morrison a few days ago before the US Congress, dribbling on, embarrassing Australia again. An article I just published is titled, "Is Prime Minister Anthony Albanese working with Scott Morrison on the $368 billion Aukus fraud scam?" I published that on Sunday the 27th of July 2025. And it starts off, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and former Prime Minister Scott Morrison seem to be working as a team, playing the good cop, bad cop routine when it comes to China and the $368 billion Aukus fraud. The relationship between Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison, which allows Morrison to represent Australia, is something that should disturb all Australians and is one of the clearest signs yet that Australia has a Labor-Liberal uni party running the country. This is happening at a time when the United Kingdom and Australia have signed a 5-decade treaty to cement the Aukus submarine pact and bolster shipbuilding in both countries as the Trump administration continues to scrutinise the ambitious technology sharing deal. Only a week ago, from Saturday the 12th of July to Friday the 18th of July 2025, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese visited China, building Australia's relationship with China. But then on Thursday the 24th of July 2025, Scott Morrison undermined Albanese's trip to China when he gave evidence before a committee of the US Congress, heavily criticising China. The ABC report on the 24th of July 2025, Scott Morrison has appeared before a committee of the US Congress to implore America to never become casual about the economic threats posed by China and its willingness to weaponise trade, pointing to China's targeted and illegal trade bans and diplomatic estrangement. When he was Prime Minister, Mr Morrison said Australia had been punished for its loyalty to the US and now had many lessons to offer the Americans. And without explicitly mentioning the upending of the trade relationships caused by the Trump administration's tariff program or its AUKUS review, he argued for tighter ties between Australia, the US and like-minded democracies to better ward off any threat. Above all, I would highlight the need to never become casual about the potential threat and to remain vigilant, he told the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. Mr Morrison was invited to testify before the bipartisan committee, which was formed in 2023 to assess the CCP threat and develop a plan of action to defend the American people. And I go on to say in the article, it is almost certain that the US Congress's Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party would have sought and been granted approval from the Australian government before they invited former Prime Minister Scott Morrison to give evidence. Why would Anthony Albanese give approval for Scott Morrison to talk publicly about China, given Scott Morrison is a compulsive liar and Scott Morrison's mouth resulted in Australia's poor relationship with China and cost Australian businesses billions of dollars in trade with China? Albanese and Labor will likely claim they did not approve Morrison giving evidence to the US Congress Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. But if they didn't, what does that say about Albanese's and the federal Labor government's relationship with the US government? The problem for Albanese and the federal Labor government is that they have been rehabilitating, via the fake National Anti-Corruption Commission, the reputations of all the criminals and crooks who ran rampant in the Scott Morrison government, and that includes rehabilitating Morrison's reputation globally. What makes Scott Morrison's attack on China worse is that Scott Morrison has a financial interest in doing so, with his current roles at American Global Strategies, Space Centre Australia and Dine Maritime, where Morrison is trying to cash in on AUKUS. For example, Dine Maritime Fund recently raised $157 million fund to invest in maritime technology related to the AUKUS Military Intelligence Sharing Pact. Now I'll play a short video which is a small part of Scott Morrison's testimony before the US Congress last week.
I appear here today in a private capacity, having previously served as the 30th Prime Minister of Australia from August 2018 to May 2022. And during that time and my earlier cabinet roles commencing in 2013, I witnessed and experienced firsthand the dramatic escalation of the CCP's regime's assertive and aggressive behaviour towards the countries in the Indo-Pacific region to achieve their goals. In Australia, this included targeted illegal trade bans and diplomatic estrangement. It is in Australia's interests for the US industrial base to be strong, and I think this is a point that's sometimes lost about allies and partners. We think it's a good thing for the US to rebuild its industrial base. We have a stake in that. And we want to ensure that happens. That's why under Aukus already we've paid $500 million in supporting nuclear submarine production here on Virginia class. I don't know of any other ally the United States has that is actually paying the United States to help build your defence industrial base on submarines. That's what a serious partner does that is keen on doing heavy lifting in a partnership.
My article goes on to say, Scott Morrison's book launch paid for by Australian taxpayers. In May 2024, I published an article titled Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd help rehabilitate Scott Morrison's reputation for the Aukus money train, which starts off, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese approved spending taxpayers' money to help disgraced former Prime Minister Scott Morrison promote his book of lies, and even had Australia's ambassador to the United States, Kevin Rudd, host the US book launch at the Australian Embassy in Washington. What makes it worse is that Scott Morrison is now an Aukus arms dealer, as I detail below, trying to cash in on the $368 billion government is wasting on Aukus. And the $368 billion that the government is wasting on Aukus seems to be the common denominator that has seen Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd embrace Scott Morrison on the global stage, in Washington at least. When Scott Morrison left federal parliament, that should have been the end of his career in the politics and his time on the political stage. But with the help of Australia's old media and some help from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd, Scotty is making a comeback. And I conclude the article by saying, here are a few key facts. Number one, Scott Morrison cashing in on Aukus would hit a brick wall if Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his government refused to work with any company associated with Scott Morrison. Why haven't Albanese and his government done that? Number two, Scott Morrison and his mates, Peter Costello and David Gazzard, made millions from the previous French submarine scheme, and that should ban Morrison from any future profiteering from defence. Number three, Scott Morrison's crimes, such as robo-debt and the 5 secret ministry appointments Morrison secretly appointed himself to administer, have been swept under the carpet by Anthony Albanese's fake National Anti-Corruption Commission. If the NAC cover-up for Morrison hadn't happened, Morrison would be facing criminal charges or be in jail now instead of cashing in on Aukus. Number four, Australia's old media, such as the Sydney Morning Herald, the ABC and other media, are helping rehabilitate Scott Morrison's reputation by regularly interviewing him and running puff pieces that Morrison's PR people give to the media. How much of Australia's rapidly rising defence spending is because of a real threat of war, and how much is because former politicians, such as Scott Morrison, Joe Hockey, Mark McGowan, etc., want to cash in on the defence spending scam? Australia has major issues such as a cost of living crisis and housing crisis, yet crooks and cronies, mostly former politicians and their staffers, want Australia to spend billions on defence projects that almost always go over budget and never achieve what they are meant to achieve. Having a few submarines in 20 years will not do Australia much good, and many experts say we'll never get them anyhow. And it won't be long before there is radar or satellite technology that shows exactly where the submarines are. And once that happens, the submarines will lose almost all their value. Many Labor Party supporters on social media try to solely blame Scott Morrison and the Liberals Nationals for Aukus, even though Anthony Albanese's government negotiated the contract and the $368 billion price tag. But there can be no doubt now, given the above, that the Aukus fraud scheme is a Labor-Liberal uni-party rort. That will be the legacy of Prime Minister for both Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison, and it won't be a good legacy to have. Now, the Aukus fraud scheme is going to be a topical issue for the next few months at least, until the United States decides what they're going to do. Hopefully they'll pull a pin on it, because we're highly unlikely to ever get the submarines anyhow, so it's just a huge scheme and damages the credibility of all the people involved, which includes Anthony Albanese, the current Labor government, Scott Morrison, the former government, which their reputation was trashed anyhow, but Scott Morrison is shameless. He shouldn't be allowed to be sticking his head up on the international stage, trying to represent Australia, doing more damage to our reputation than he had already done. Anyhow, make sure you visit my website, Kangaroo Court of Australia, and read that article. It's got a lot of links to a lot further information, especially the names of the politicians who are trying to cash in on the Aukus fraud scheme, the Australian politicians. And please do your bit and help shine a light on corruption and share this video on social media. And please hit the like and subscribe button and notification button. That way you get notified every time I publish a new video. And Kangaroo Court of Australia's independent media. I publish a website and a YouTube channel. And I'm 100% crowdfunded from viewers like yourself. So please support my Patreon account or PayPal account. You can donate any amount, $3, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30, $40, $50 a month, whatever suits your budget. It all helps out in a big way. And the link for the Patreon account and PayPal account are below this video on YouTube and also on my website. Or you can go to my website and click on the donations page for further donation options. Other than that, thank you for your time and have a good day.